Okay.
Hi, hello. It's so cool to see so many of you. Been really excited about tonight actually, and we have Jack with us. Who, Lizzie has explained. Poor Jack is a bit poorly today. Got a sore throat and is sounding a little bit very white. So we're hoping that Jack's voice is going to hold out for the whole of the session. We may have to cut it slightly short if it doesn't, but Jack is determined to give it his best shot. So we're hoping he's going to be okay. Jack Pransky. So has everybody finished reading the book, by the way?
It doesn't matter if you haven't.
It really doesn't matter.
I'm not going to tell you off.
No. But it's it's obviously our first book for the Life Changing Book Club, and it's a very special book for both myself and Lizzie, because it was the first book that we read that really pointed to the understanding, the three principles understanding that we shared in the book, and kind of set the course for both of us really to look more deeply in this direction, and well, for me and I think for Lizzie as well, to become coaches in this way. So it's got a very kind of special place in our hearts, and I've come across quite a few people who it's one of the first books that they read on this journey as well. So it's it's had a very powerful message for me. Just wanted to introduce Jack. If you want to just give everyone a wave, Jack, and say hello. But I basically how tonight is going to kind of work is I'm just going to start off by asking you, Jack, a couple of questions about the book, just a bit of an introduction really, and then we will look to open up questions from the group, and just really see where that takes us. Just have a very open, honest discussion. Anything anybody wants to chip in or ask. There's no getting anything right or wrong. We're just, I don't know how many of you were on the call. A few of you were on the call that we had just for the, us, the book club members, and it was just a really lovely space of kind of sharing ideas and insights and thoughts. We just want to keep it to that really friendly vibe and just really see where we go with it all. Or I think someone else might just joined us as well. I'm not sure who that is. So Jack, I guess when I first read your book, like I said before, it was one of the first books that I read in this Three Principles journey, and all I remember from my first reading. Lizzie, sorry, could you mute Ashley? I think there's some background noise coming in. Yeah, thank you. I really kind of I remember reading the book and really thinking, wow, this is really amazing. There's something really special here. There's something I've really heard from this book. And I guess I didn't really know what that was at the time. I couldn't really articulate what it was that I'd sort of heard and what it was that had like made that difference. But just really want to kind of hear from you what you think, what is it in the book, in the understanding, that you think kind of has really made a difference to people's lives?
Well, first of all, hello everyone. My voice is about 3 octaves lower than usual. And everything will be okay if I don't start coughing. So I'll just last for as long as I can. But to answer your question, I think everyone has a tendency to see life from the outside in. And believe that our experience of life is coming to us from what people do, the circumstances we find ourselves in, situations we find ourselves in. And it's like kind of a shocking thing when we see that that's not the way it is at all, that it really is our own thinking combined with consciousness that is what makes us feel the way that we do, makes us perceive what we perceive, that is what we call reality. You know, it's shocking when we really see it. And that, I think, is what changes people's lives.
And what was it that really drove your desire to write? I know you've written other books as well as this one. I know you're finishing up one at the moment, but what is it that really drove your desire to want to get this out there in the form of a book?
Well, I had written a book called Parenting from the Heart. And I think this was in, I think I may have put this in the introduction to my book. Excuse me. So this publicist wanted me to go to soundbite school, I called it, and really crystallize what my points were for the parenting book. And so I asked myself that question, and I went to take a walk in the woods, and I kept getting these insights that came to me, and I thought, wait a minute, these things don't have anything to do with parenting. Well, they do, but they weren't specifically for parenting. Excuse me. So I thought, whoa, I have to write a self-help book, because that's what came to me at the time. That's how it happened. It happened very innocently. I never set out to write a self-help book.
And how do you, I mean, you must have, I know the case studies in the book are really, beautiful and real stories of transformation. And I'm kind of guessing you've come across a lot of other people that have been impacted, as a result of the book. How would you say, like, what are the biggest sort of changes that you see with people?
Well, I just recently, there was a fellow who was horribly depressed for many, many, many years. And I had a couple of sessions with him. And I kept seeing a glimmer of hope for him during the session. But then every time after the session was over, he would just fall back to where he was before. And I was thinking, whoa, he's really tough, And I kind of got the idea that he maybe needed medication. And that's a little out of my bailiwick. So I recommended to him that he go and talk to Bill Pettit, who's a longtime psychiatrist who uses this approach. And Bill's approach to him was to read Sid Banks's book, The Missing Link, together and discuss it. And at first, this guy named John didn't relate to that at all. But then he said, I think it opened up a little crack in my psyche or something. So then he happened to be listening to a tape by Dr Pransky. And all of a sudden, he got an amazing, amazing insight about that he was creating his depression. So like if he didn't think that he was depressed, he really wouldn't be. It was such a shock to him. Then he went back and he read a couple of pages. I think it was 80 and 81 or something of Somebody Should Have Told Us. And he had read that book about 4 times before. And all of a sudden he saw something in it that really shook him to his roots. I got an email from him the other day. He is no longer depressed. He's just cured of his depression. And you can tell from talking to him that he will never go back to where he was. I mean, it's just things like that they're just miracles. And I don't know how it happens. I mean, if people get insights where they see their own creation, and all we're doing is experiencing our own creations over and over and over again. And that's very humbling when we realize that that's what we're doing. Like, we're making it up, and then we're suffering from the effects of what we made up. Shocking.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful and powerful stuff there. And I think that really points to all of the books that we're going to be reading in the book club, and particularly the one that we're talking about tonight. It's really reading them with that kind of complete open mind, isn't it? And really being open to insight occurring. And that could happen, every time I read, your books, Jack, I read something different in them. I know people have said the same about Sydney Banks' books and all, other people, in that, I didn't read that the first time round. It's always been in the book, but
how did it get in there now?
Yeah, that wasn't there the first.
Where was it the first time I read it?
Yeah, and it's that completely understanding via insight, I think, that you were just speaking to then, and that's where the power is with all of these books, really, that we're going to be looking at as well.
Great.
So Richard has a question. Richard,
Please.
I'll unmute you.
I love questions.
Jack, I just wondered historically what your first contact with the Three Principles was. Was it, I mean, I know that George Pransky is a cousin of yours, but can you explain how you first came across it?
Well, when I first came across it, I didn't know George Pransky. I mean, we were cousins, but he had moved across the country. I lived around Massachusetts and Vermont, and he moved to Washington State, California. And I first bumped into this approach that at the time was called psychology of mind, way back in 1991. When through my field is the field of prevention of problem behaviors, and I went to a conference where this guy Roger Mills was one of the keynote speakers, and he was talking about these amazing results that he got in 2 low-income, inner city housing communities. Inner city housing projects in the States, down near Miami, Florida. And I was listening to him talk, and I couldn't believe the results. They were head and shoulders above anything that I had seen in prevention before. And he brought with him a couple of the women from the housing projects, and that's, if I was suspicious before, which I was, when they started to talk, it just did something to me, because I could tell something so deep had happened to them that their lives would never be the same. And I wrote that all that up in a book called Modelo, which is the story of how that project unfolded from beginning to end, and how people's lives, which were in the depths of despair in lots of different ways, were totally turned around. And the entire housing project was totally turned around. And that's what turned me on to it originally. And then, so I was writing a book about prevention at the time called Prevention, the Critical Need. And so I went up to Roger Mills afterwards and I asked him if I could squeeze something in there about my, what he did. Because at the time I considered it just to be another really good prevention project. And he's the one who asked me, "Are you related to George Pransky?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll have to ask my mother." So it turned out that George and I eventually met. He kind of took me under his wing. But before that, I had a personal experience with Sid Banks, who completely blew my mind apart. I was never the same after my encounter with Sid. And at that point, there was no turning back. Like, there was no way that I could go back to doing what I was doing. And my entire book, Prevention, the Critical Need, became obsolete to me. So, you start seeing something in a completely different way, and then there's no choice. You just have no choice. So that's what happened.
And sorry, do you mind just explaining what it was like meeting Sid Banks?
Well, I can't really go into it right now. It's actually, I put the story in the new book that I'm writing.
Okay.
That I'm just about finished with, which is called Seduced by Consciousness. And that story's in there. But I will say that he just started talking to me. Like, if you've listened to his tapes, the way he talks on his tapes, and I was getting extremely irritated. And all of a sudden, my head exploded. I mean, I don't even know what happened to me. It was like I was transported into a different realm. So, nothing looked the same after that. But interestingly, even though, like, I got the thought at the time, I don't know anything about what he said. So I knew that he knew that he was speaking truth. And I knew that things were not as they seemed. Like, life was not as it had seemed to me all the way up until, I guess it was 1993 at that point. And, but then I had to integrate it with the rest of my life, and that took a while. Things were pretty unclear. Things are much less clear in those days than they are now about what the three principles are and what Sid Banks was talking about. So I just feel blessed and grateful that I bumped into him in my life. And the fact that I can pass the little that I know onto other people and have their lives be affected. That's really humbling. I'm totally grateful for it. never ceases to amaze me. What else you got out there? Trust me, you got to let me off the hook here, because I just keep talking with my voice like this. So I need to be stimulated by questions, or if you have comments.
I mean, Lizzie, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, if to save Jack his voice, we could go round and ask people to chip in what their own reaction to the book has been. I mean, obviously on a voluntary basis, but just to give Jack a few minutes to have a glass of water and stuff.
Yeah. Would that be helpful, Jack?
I'd love to hear that myself.
Great idea. Okay. So, Linda, can we come back to your question?
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So would anybody like to, I'm going to unmute everybody for a minute now. Would anybody like to start off on what they heard in the book, anything they wanted to say about their experience of the book?
It's a very quiet crowd.
Well, I'll start off, because it was the first book that I came across when somebody told me about the principles, and it's really interesting. I hear this from so many people, that they can remember that first moment when someone told them about the principles. It was somebody told me about the Sid Banks, "You're not insecure, you just think you are," and that just made so much sense to me, because I think that was the story of my life too, as of so many of us. And I just thought, I've got to get hold of this book, which the guy was talking about when he spoke about Sid Banks. And I read your book, Jack, 3 times back to back. I just didn't stop. And yeah, I mean, my copy is just so highlighted and underlined, and pages turned over, and little comments on the back page. And every time I read it, so this is the 4th time I've read it for this group, and just for what I love, one of the things I love is the first story you tell about Lisa. Lisa had never climbed a mountain, and that's it's just such a wonderful story of, that climbing a mountain is such a wonderful metaphor for all of us. Have got those mountains in our lives, but for her it really was a mountain. And I just watching how her thinking kind of ebbed and flowed through that experience, and I think I just was really related to, I could really see how that happens in my own life, in every situation, that the same situation looks completely different just depending on what I'm thinking about it at the time.
That's great.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience of the book, and same.
Alan, would you mind speaking up a little? You're very soft.
Yeah, I also read the book, I think 2 or 3 times, and that was very unusual for me. I often kind of got 2/3 of the way through a book and then moved on to the next one. So it was, it was really good. And I do remember just kind of thinking, by that point I'd trained as a hypnotherapist and was an NLP practitioner, and was kind of going down that path quite happily. And then it was a colleague of mine who was really interested in the principles, and I'd kind of looked into it, didn't really get it, didn't really know much about it, and then she recommended your book. So again, I read that, and I just felt this deep feeling of kind of coming home and peace, and just really thinking, oh, I know this is it. I know this is what I've been trying to find. And I couldn't even really articulate that or explain what that was, but I just knew I had that sense of it. Just, this makes everything okay. That's certainly how I felt when I first read it.
That's great.
Yeah. How's everybody else been finding finding the book.
Sabia's got a hand up. So Sabia, I've unmuted you. I know you've written your question in the chat here to me, but would you like to say that?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Oh, great. I didn't think.
You're quite quiet.
I'm sorry. My voice is going. I've been quite.
I don't think we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Just.
Okay. Jack, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very softly, but I can't concentrate.
I'm experiencing difficulties with emotional eating, and it's having a really negative impact on my life. And it's not what I want, but I seem to act on the thoughts when I know that I don't have to. Logically, I understand I have choice here. I don't have to act on it. But it's like, it's like I have no power over it. And I find myself walking into the kitchen, opening the fridge and just consuming, even when I don't need any food.
So your question is?
Emotional, sorry. Why do I do that when I know I don't want it? I'm not happy with the results and it's not what I want for myself.
Well, first of all, my heart really goes out to you. You know, that's a really tough thing. You know, it was interesting that you said that, like, I think you said, I know it's my thinking, but I can't help it. And the trouble is that what we think that we're thinking, like what we see that we're thinking, is only the tip of the iceberg. There are thoughts behind our thoughts that we have no idea that we're thinking, that are really the thing that are driving us. So with something like emotional eating, we are getting something from that, or we have the illusion that we're getting something from it. You know, and so if we ask ourselves, well, what am I getting from eating when I don't have to eat? You know, what am I really getting from that? And then, so we get an answer. We get quiet, have an answer come about what we think we're getting. And then we're at a position of calling our reality into question. Like, is it really true that that's what I'm really getting from this emotional eating stuff? Or is it just an illusion that's created from my own thinking that I think that it's giving me what I want? See, really the answers, the ego is a very, very tricky thing. And we have a tendency in life to think that the ego is what will solve our problems. So we go into personal thinking to solve our problems. Well, personal thinking is what created the problem in the first place. We can't really solve the problem at the level that it's created. Einstein said that. What we need is fresh, new ideas that come to us from a higher level of consciousness, from out of the blue, that allow us to transcend the personal, and which, by the way, is a retreat I'm holding in Spain in May or June, I think it is, called Transcending the Personal. And what we really want to be able to do is fall back into the quiet, which is where all the answers lie. Because within the quiet, within the silence, we are connected to the intelligence behind all of life. And when we get an insight that we've never had before, that's the intelligence behind life talking to us. That's universal mind speaking to us. It comes through us. And that's where the answers would lie for something like emotional eating. I don't know if that was helpful to you at all.
Yes, it was. It was. Yes, I think I need to sit with that. Just one more thing, please. You talked about looking into and questioning what it is that I think I get from this.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sort of done that on and off over the last couple of years. And right now I'm slightly confused because, and I don't know if this is my misunderstanding, since I've become aware of the three principles, this is what I've heard, that you don't need to analyze or question the why so much. It's just a thought. Don't identify with it, or just don't do anything and it will pass. That's what I've heard a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm hearing from you is the ego is very tricky, and to look into what we're getting, what I'm getting from this action that I say that I don't want.
So when you say you've asked yourself that in the past, what answers do you get?
I feel uninspired, bored at the moment in my life. My life has changed it feels like it's changed drastically over the last 3 years, and it has done. And but then if I look back, I've realized I've had this eating issue for about good 7 years, 5, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't aware of it until about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So this is interesting because so you have a thought, uninspired and bored. Right?
Yes.
And you have a thought, eating is going to fix that.
Yes. Something in me feels that, yes.
Yeah. Well, does it?
No, it doesn't, because it doesn't. Then it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it may do something for you in the moment, but then it comes back. So if nothing, so underneath emotional eating is uninspired and bored. And if nothing is done about uninspired and bored, then you're still going to be involved in emotional eating. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and not enjoying motherhood.
Ah, right. Okay, well, the idea would be to see those as thought. Like it really looks like the world is making us be uninspired and bored and not enjoying motherhood. But really, those are just thoughts that we have created inadvertently. Like we don't go out of, excuse me, We don't go out of our way to create them. But where did they come from? You know, we made them up. And I mean, you know, this is where calling these things into question comes in. Is it really true that life is uninspiring and boring producing? You know? And is it really true that motherhood is, I forget the word you used.
I'm not enjoying it. I find it
okay. Unenjoyable. Yeah. So all of those things we very subtly make up. And consciousness, the job of consciousness is to take any thought that we come up with and send it right through the senses so that we get a real sensory experience of it. And we believe it because it feels so true. But that's the only thing that's going on. The reason it feels so true is because consciousness is making it so. Our own thinking, that's all that's going on all the time. We get a thought like, I'm bored. Consciousness picks it up. We really, really, really feel bored. But we made it up. It wouldn't exist if it weren't for the fact that we made it up. How humbling is that? We make up what we end up suffering from. We wouldn't be suffering if we didn't make it up. It's really very humbling when people catch on to this. And then I forget all the time. I forget that it's, I mean, it's just for something like food, it's so easy to think, oh, if I just have this piece of chocolate cake, my life's gonna be a lot better. But it doesn't really work that way, because once the cake is devoured, what's left? You know, still that feeling that drove us there in the first place. There's no answers in the outside world, but we think there are. That's why we get so trapped.
Jack,
Linda,
thank you so much. Let's continue with, because Jack's been using a lot of voice there to share all that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right.
You're okay.
All right.
So, shall we just continue? I'm just going to mute you, Sabia, with other people who wanted to just say what they'd got from the book. So, Linda, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I really, really, really appreciated the diagrams that you have in there, because I'm a very visual person, and when I saw those diagrams, it just made everything make sense. And can I ask my question now too?
Sure.
Because it relates to what you were just saying, and I very much enjoyed the case study you had at the very end of the book with the woman who you just gave her one generous session where she talked about trauma, and that's how I came to this work. And I was following links, so I'm not exactly sure, but I began to see that all of these sources had this 3 principles thing behind them. So maybe I should check that out.
Yeah.
And but I'm curious about so what you said, and then the thinking behind the thinking behind the thinking often comes from trauma or early childhood wounding, and a lot of counseling on that says that it's held in the body. So I'm curious about how that fits into everything you just said.
Well, it's very interesting what you said, because you said, like, if we suffer from trauma, it comes from the trauma. Like, it comes from what happened to us. That's the way it looks. But really, it comes from our thinking about what happened to us, what we make of that for our lives, what we have decided its meaning is for our life. Like, I can't remember whether this is in somebody should have told us or not, but is it in there that there were these two women in a training of mine who had suffered, they were severely raped when they were teenagers? So I'm seeing Sherry's.
I don't remember.
Well, okay, so I'll say what it is then. I mean,
okay.
Both of them severely, violently raped as teenagers. So one of them.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of them says to herself, "Oh, you know, what happened to me was like, you know, I'm damaged goods. Just like the worst thing that could happen to me. I don't care about life now." So she ended up getting heavily into drugs and prostituting herself for money to buy drugs and selling drugs. And that's what her life became. And the other one said, "Yeah, that was horrible, but I'm not going to let it affect my life." And she lived as if her life was not affected by it. So my point is, it's not the trauma. It's what we've come to think about it. Then once we've thought about it as like this horrible thing that's going to affect the way we are forever, that thought can get into the cells of the body.
Okay.
It's not the trauma that gets into the cells of the body. It's that thought gets
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in working with somebody, would you address the body, or is it enough to address the thinking and then the body will adjust?
Well, I personally would only address the body if someone brought the body issues to me.
Okay.
Like, I wouldn't direct people there. I would direct people to what it is that they made of that for their lives. And how is that affecting them today? And the fact that, and this is really hard for some people to grasp, but it was hard for me to grasp, but that the past doesn't really exist. It's over, it's gone, it's done. The only thing that exists is our thinking about the past now. That's what the past is for us, what we think about it now. And what we think about it now says everything. Go ahead.
And if we find, I'm trying to sort this out. So if we find ourselves thinking about the past, is it recommended to just let it go or stop thinking about it? Because I read that it's not really about stop thinking about it. But if we do realize, oh, I'm thinking about the past and I don't want to think about the past because I'm here, is that just enough to have that realization and then carry on, I guess?
Well, it's the chapter heading, "What we see is what we get." You know, so there's no right and wrong or good and bad or anything like that. It's just whatever we see about what happened to us in the past is what we're getting as an experience of it now. And when we realize that whatever we're getting as an experience now is just what we happen to have made up about it, that when we see the real source, we're then free from it. Like, we have thought the source came from what happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see, wait a minute, the source is our own creation, not what happened. What happened, happened. But we have come to some conclusion about it. That's our creation. That's what gets to us. We see that, we're free.
And the same holds true even if whatever happened when we were too young to consciously make it, or not, just before we have words to, or thoughts, or words, I guess.
Well, thoughts come right from the beginning.
Right, so words, before
Words.
we're conscious of what we're thinking. Okay.
I mean, God knows in what language little kids think, but they have thoughts. So do dogs, you know.
Thank you, it was really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jeannie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. Hello, Jack. Thank you very much for your book. It was my first introduction to the principles, and Lizzie gave it to me, and it changed a lot for me. And I am still left with the question, what is there no place then for psychotherapy? Is there any place for psychotherapy?
Is there no place for what therapy?
Psychotherapy.
Psychotherapy. Oh, well, are you talking about traditional psychotherapy?
Well, I'm talking about the sort of idea that I had always believed, that it's helpful to journey with somebody into past events where they maybe reframe the story they tell themselves about it, or where they think about the trauma that they can remember, and just the very fact that they're telling you about it, and that you are kind of a witness, as it were, of it in their memory, that I have been trained to think that was a helpful and therapeutic thing for somebody. And I suppose, you know, this discussion makes me wonder whether there is any use in doing that, because I noticed that it sounded to me in the book as though you were sort of saying there's not a lot of value in doing that.
Well, I'm for whatever works. And if that is really helpful to somebody, far be it for me to try to take it away from them. All I'm saying really is that I've seen, excuse me, more power when people see their creation of illusion, and when people realize that within our pure consciousness, everything that we're looking for already exists. And the research tends to back that up now, that when people see that the only experience they can ever have, ever, no exceptions, is created from their own thinking, brought to life by consciousness. And when people see that we already have this automatic peace, love, and wisdom that is within us already, nothing we can do about it. Just gets covered up by the way we've come to use our thinking. Innocently it gets covered up. Once that veil is pulled off, people have insights about that, just like that depressed guy that I was talking about. I've just seen miracles occur.
So what a related question would be, is there, when do you know how to trust your thinking? Because in the book, I understood you to say that when your mood is low, your thinking is unreliable, untrustworthy in that place. But I've been experimenting a bit with that myself, and I've had times when I feel that my mood has been low, and yet my thinking has been guiding me to take good action, even though my mood has been low. And I've been tussling with this thing of, when do you trust your thinking? Because clearly there must be a good place for analytical thinking in our lives.
Well, sure. I mean, like where it's useful, we want to use it. It's only when it brings us down, when it's not useful, that the problem comes in.
But the feeling might not always be a good guide, because...
Well, but I bet you, I'd be willing to bet that if we looked inside of you when you were in a low mood, and then you had a thought about what you could do to be guided, I'll bet we would see that there was a shift in mood or in feeling within you at that moment.
After the thought.
Yeah, or at the same time as the thought.
So that would almost be like the indicator of whether to go with the thought.
That's the issue. It's like every thought that we have taken seriously comes with a feeling attached.
Yeah.
And the feeling is our guide. Like anybody who's had a big insight about anything knows that it comes with a feeling of
yeah.
Or aha, or
So it's the feeling
elation.
afterwards. That's the difference, I suppose. I was imagining that it's the feeling before that often isn't that great, but it's the feeling after the thought that is kind of the guide almost.
Yeah, like at any moment our head can clear, just like that. Our head can clear.
Yeah.
Like we can be in the depths of despair. Our head can clear.
Yeah.
And when our head clears, that's when we get insights, new insights. And there's a different feeling when an insight comes and before it comes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Richard.
Hi. Yeah. Actually, I was going to say something about the book, but it ties in quite well with what Jack was just saying there, that I was thinking like my sort of version of the title of the book would be, I wish I'd known about this 20 years ago, because which is the same way as saying, someone should have told us, because I've had lots of psychotherapy going back years to deal with what I thought were my issues. And I can honestly say that at sort of 20 years of psychotherapy, I think I understood my history better, but I didn't feel I had made any progress. But in the sort of 6 months or so that I've been the three principles, I feel things have shifted a lot more. I mean, it's not sort of necessarily a question about progress, but I feel a lot more at peace with myself in, say, 6 months or so than 20 years of different types of psychotherapists.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wish I'd read this book 20 years ago, basically, and it would have saved me a lot of bills and and in some ways, when I was just listening to you guys talk about psychotherapy, the image that came into my head was a washing machine constantly rotating dirty washing, but not being able to open that washing. So I just felt that I was talking about my so-called problems for 20 years, and I was just going around in circles. So I feel that the three principles has sort of opened the door, and the washing machine has been thrown out the window.
Well, that's great, Richard, but it could be that you weren't ready to hear it 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, life tends to throw us things when we're ready.
Yeah.
And I would say myself that that's universal mind in action. So whenever it shows up, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I mean,
go ahead.
A question, but I sort of, it's one of these devil's advocate questions, and I sort of know the answer, but it sometimes worries me that if, you know, we're talking about, you know, creating things from the inside, but it sometimes worries me that that could be like a recipe for being extremely passive in your life. So, for example, I mean, this isn't my situation, but if someone was in an abusive relationship and then they thought, oh, I'm just creating this in my head, so I'll stay in the relationship. That could, as I say, that could be a recipe for inaction. And the same for a job. You know, you might have it, and I suppose I can relate to this more. You know, I've been in jobs that I've hated, and if I look, I've moved on and changed career, and if I look back, I'm glad that I got out of that job. But if I'd sat in that job and said, "Well, I'm just creating this reality," you know, like Sabir that was saying, you know, she wasn't enjoying motherhood. If I'd at the time been doing the job that I was doing and told myself that I'd created that reality, then I still might be in this job, which, quite frankly, I'm delighted that I moved on and have gone into a more, what I find, a more fulfilling career.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up. That is one of the misnomers of understanding the three principles. Because we also have this thing within us called wisdom. And if we're in an abusive relationship, wisdom is speaking to us. It's telling us to take action to protect ourselves. But either we're not listening, or we come up with other thoughts that we believe more. But if we really took a step back, we would see that, you know, like, if we asked ourselves, is this really? Well, let's put it this way. In the Modelo Housing Project, which is the first program that I bumped into about this. So there was a woman who was severely being beaten by her boyfriend on crack. And because she felt worthless about herself, she was saying to herself, well, at least I have somebody who loves me. Even though she was getting the crap beat out of her. Now, when she started to feel within herself like more like that she was worth something, she thought to herself, wait a minute, I'm worth more than this. I'm worth more than getting beaten all the time. And so she said, stop, no more. Now, normally, if she had said no more, it would have resulted in a bigger beating. But this time when she said no more, it came from such power from within her that the guy backed off. Now she ended up having to change the locks on her doors, kick the guy out, change the locks on her doors. But wisdom told her to do that. It's not a passive thing at all. When we realize that wisdom is always there as a guide, and wisdom protects us. So thank you for that question. A lot of people.
Thank you for the answer.
Cherry, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Oh, hello?
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me.
Yes.
Partly I was just gonna agree with what Jack has just said, really, that like there's sometimes I hear this understanding and it gets very locked into the thought piece. So the thought piece gets a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And the piece that doesn't get a lot of attention sometimes is like the wisdom. What I call it the sun inside, right? It's like the sun is always shining on the inside, whether you can see it or not. And so really that was my thinking when Richard asked this question, was like, oh yeah, I so get it. I so understand that it looks that way. But if we point a little deeper, actually that wisdom, that innate wealth, that thing, that part of us that knows exactly what we can do and what we need to do next is right there. And like I'm about to be made redundant at work, so this is kind of really current for me. And so there's a piece of that which is like, oh, panic, and then most of the time I am surprisingly well, and I'm not even kidding. I am amazed at how, like, I feel really well. So, and yet a couple of years ago, this wouldn't have been an okay environment for me to be in, but today, it's like, yeah, there is a piece of this that's a little bit like, oh, but there's also a piece of me that knows, you know what, actually the sun's shining on the inside, and somehow, somewhere, I've got this. It's going to be all right.
That's great. Yeah. I happen to be wearing this t-shirt here. I don't know if you can see it. See that? So that's the sun on the inside, right?
Boom.
This is our innate health.
Yes.
It contains peace, love, wisdom. Okay?
Yes.
That's automatically in our pure consciousness. And then on the outside, we get this other thinking that makes us where we think ourselves away from it. So we get thoughts of fear, and everything that comes out of that. We get thoughts of ego. We get beliefs. And those things, you can see this line here is a little consciousness line. So we get a thought down here of depression. Consciousness picks it up, makes it look and feel absolutely real. It's down at this level. We're feeling it. We get a thought of, oh, maybe it's not so bad, and then we've jumped up to here. And we get a feeling, wait a minute, this person is treating me bad. He must have had such horrible things happen to him in his life in order to treat other people that way. And we get a thought of compassion, and we're up here. And so whatever thought we get, that's where we're going to end up on the consciousness line. And we keep going up and down, bouncing up and down all day long. But some of them we really believe, and that's where we stick for a while. So, yeah.
I think Anna wanted to ask something. Go ahead, Anna.
Hi, hello, Jack. Hi, lovely to meet you. I've read most of your book, and it was just something that touched me today in particular. When you wake up, for some of us, when we wake up in the morning, so our armor is not on. So of course these feelings come in, and you're sort of aware that, no, this is just anxiety, whatever it is. I know it is, but it's kind of almost like part of your body, so you don't know how to unstick it. So what do you do then? Because you're at your most vulnerable time. For me, because I'm playing around with it and it seems to be working, but that kind of time, and maybe for some people, maybe it's because we're going through the change. I don't know, it's physical when you actually feel that you don't know how to switch it off. How do you do that? It's kind of there. You know it's a thought, but you don't know how to let it pass because it's somehow physically already affecting you.
Well, that's because thoughts go by so lightning fast that we don't see them as thought. We're just left with the feeling of it. And so we're not seeing when we wake up in the morning with anxiety, we're not seeing all the thoughts that are behind the scenes that are causing the anxiety in the first place. We're just feeling the anxiety.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm in a situation like that, and I have my wits about me, I don't. The feeling is a signal that something is off in my thinking. And I can't trust it. See, I know that's what the feeling means to me.
Yeah.
I can't really trust my thinking now. And even having a thought like that, all of a sudden I jump up a little bit in the level of consciousness.
Yeah.
And, and then I might go about business during the day, and I might see myself drop again. And again, if I have my wits about me, it's like, and for me, actually, I mostly catch it after the fact. I'm not that good. I'm not that good at catching it in the moment. But after the fact, I'll say, "Oh my God, how did I let myself go there?"
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll wake up to it. Well, it would be nice if I caught it in the moment, but I didn't. So what? I'm catching it now. That's what counts.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll be a little more alert or awake to catching it another time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Is there anyone else that we haven't heard from? Oh, Judy. Go ahead, Judy.
Yeah. Oh, Jack, I really want to thank you for your comments just a moment ago, because you wrote the book on it. So I kind of figured, well, you've got it, and you're just having Sid Banks moments your whole life. For you to say that you go in and out of it, I mean, this is the first time.
So you're breaking up a little bit, Judy.
That I think I stopped asking.
You sound like you're from outer space right now.
So, yeah, how do you do it? I mean,
okay.
So do it.
No, I just heard that. Okay.
Now I kind of add more of a pendulum. Swings very far one way.
Okay.
Sometimes you're very spiritual, and other times you're very, let's say, human. And
well, it's all human. It's all part of human. Okay. So we we come out of the formless into form. And when we come, excuse me, into form, we forget our connection to the formless. We forget that we are part of it. We forget that we truly are peace, love, and wisdom at our core. You know, we fall out of it. And really, it's all, I think life is really about waking up to it in whatever way that we can wake up to it. And sometimes we're, excuse me, sometimes we're going to be lost, and sometimes we're going to be awake. But there's a common question that gets asked, which is, how do you do it? And that's not the right question. The right question is about seeing, not doing. Like, it's always about what we see. So the question could be something like, what am I seeing now that is bringing me to this state? Out of that, we're going to naturally feel things and do things. But if we go to doing without having the thought to back it up, we're going to be fighting against ourselves. So it's a question of what we see, what we're seeing with our thinking. That's where the real power lies in changing lives.
Jack, I've just got a question here that John couldn't make it to the call, but he posted a question earlier, which I'll just read out to you. He says, I see the principles as pretty straightforward. We notice that we're feeling our thinking, or we forget and blame other things for how we feel until we remember again. Lots of trainers talk about deepening understanding of the principles. What's Jack's take on what this means? Is it just seeing the reality of our experience more often?
Well, I wish John was here so I could ask him more what he meant by that. A really deep understanding to me is two things. When we know, when we see no exceptions, you know, that the only way that I can be feeling the way that I am is because my thinking has created it. Consciousness drives it right through the senses, makes it look and feel absolutely real. That's the only thing. It's it. That's it. It's all that's ever going on. We really see no exceptions. That's a deep understanding. And when we really see that all the answers lie in the silence, whether our head clears in a moment or whether our mind gets quiet, or whether we just forget about our personal thinking and we connect to this universal source of intelligence within us, that's always where the answers lie. Always, no exceptions. That's a deep understanding. And I forget the phrase, maybe John said that we live in the feeling of our thinking. He may have said something like that, but you know, one could see that in a very shallow way. I mean, it's true, but one could see that in a very shallow way. One could even repeat the words, but not see it at all. Or one could see it in a really, really deep way, so that it affects everything about life. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a quick question before we finish? We've just got a few minutes. Oh, Anna again. Yeah. Go ahead, Anna.
Hi. No, it's just I wanted to add something. I mean, today I was working in a school with children with lots of disabilities. Mm-hmm. And I found that having read the book, I was able to see that actually these children, or these young people, were probably living in the moment and probably had this gift because their mind wasn't as busy as maybe some of our minds. Some were struggling because they were autistic, but then there were others. And it was very nice to see that the book actually helped me to be able to understand that whoever there are, all sorts of people with all sorts of abilities and disabilities, that is still there. And I found that very helpful.
That's great.
Mm.
Really wonderful. I'm glad. Sometimes little kids understand this better than we do. I don't know if you know, I co-wrote 2 children's books for little kids, 2 children's picture books. One is called What is a Thought? A Thought is a Lot. And the other is called What is Wisdom and Where Do I Find It? And those books have been very helpful to little kids.
Richard, go ahead.
No, I was really interested what Jack said in reply to John's question about, you know, how do you sort of gain a deeper understanding? And then when Jack said, you know, it's about seeing it, not doing it, and you could just repeat the words and not understand it. And I feel in my desperation to sort of immerse myself in the principles, I've been trying too hard, and I've been like, I found it that this sort of Sid Banks motto about we have innate wisdom or mental health, and the only thing that contaminates it is our thinking, it had a profound effect on me when I first heard that. So then I thought to myself, oh, if I just say that to myself enough times, like a mantra, you know, then I'll be sorted. And initially it worked. And then I've been sort of cycling in and back and to and fro from work and saying it to myself like 100 times and realizing that I'm trying to do it and I'm trying to say the words, and I'm not really having an insight. I'm just trying to sort of flagellate myself with this mantra.
I see. It's great bringing that up, Richard, because it really points to the fact that the answer does not lie in the words. You know, words and pictures are what we're stuck with. That's all we've got to describe something that is indescribable. All we can do is point in a direction. And it's the pointing in that direction that makes the difference, because, you know, we can start repeating something like that, like a mantra, and at some point it loses its power because we've lost the thought behind it.
Yeah.
It makes no difference whatsoever. But pointing to what? You know, it's like this vastness this incomprehensible vastness that is such a gift to all of us. It's you start to look at that realm and what it offers us, and it's like the most phenomenal thing. And it just has to really look there has a real sense of awe attached to it. And from that place, problem behaviors are impossible, because it's a place of love and it's a place of peace. So if we can get people pointed there, we are golden. And I think a lot of, I think maybe Sherry brought this up, but there's been a lot of talk about thought in the three principles, and not enough talk about what the formless energy behind life brings us. But they're both important. But get the simplicity. The simplicity is, well, that's all that's going on. We are creating thoughts that consciousness picks up, that gives us our only experience that we can have. And there's this vast resource that is us already, that we can unleash, because it is us that it brings us everything we're looking for in life. And everything about what the three principles are about can be boiled down to that. I mean, I don't know where this thing came from, but the simplicity of the three principles came to me one day in one sentence. And I don't know where it came from. It didn't come from me. I wouldn't have been able to figure this out in a million years. But it said, all we are is peace, love, and wisdom, and the power to create the illusion that we're not. That's it.
We need to wind up shortly, but I noticed, Judy, you just raised your hand. Did you want to say something before we finish? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, please. I just wanted to clarify, I get really confused about this idea whether the thoughts are in our control or not, and or whether they just kind of arrive and we have no control over them. And I just wondered if you could please speak to that, because you were talking about we create our thoughts.
Yeah.
And I tend to take everything really literally, and I can't get my head around it, if that makes sense.
That's a great question, and a very important one. I don't know about you, but I don't have control over most thoughts that come into my head. I don't know where they come from. I don't know what they're doing there, but they just pop in. That's not where my power lies. My power lies in what I make of them once they get there. So who knows where they come from, but they come through us. So that means that, and they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for us. That's why their creation, our creation to me, they would not exist otherwise. Now, we might not go out of our way to create them, but they are still our creation, no matter where they come from. but our power is in the thought about the thought, really. You know, it's like, all right, is this, what meaning does this have for my life? You know, am I going to take this to heart or let it roll off my back like water off a duck's back? That's power. That's our creative gift.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you. It's pretty much time to start drawing things to a close. I think it's been a really, really beautiful hour and a half, and thank you so much for everyone's thoughts and contributions. And
yeah, thank you all for your input and questions. It's been great.
And I loved what you
from my standpoint.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted actually to say a bit, Jack, about the retreat that you're running. Just very quickly, it's in June. I know the dates, Jack. It's the 8th to the 12th of June, and it's in Spain, isn't it? And I'm going to post a link actually up on the group about it, so that if anyone's interested in having a look, you can just find out a bit more there, more details about that. And hopefully,
can I say one thing about it, Ali? Is that I've noticed that when people sit in this presence together and everybody goes deeper together, a really different thing happens from reading a book or even getting one-on-one counseling or coaching on it. It's and I'm not saying that to either blow my own horn or try to get people to come or whatever like that, but I've just seen some amazing things happen. That's been incredible. So I would, and it's in a beautiful place in Algiers, Spain, which is kind of halfway up the Mediterranean coast. And I just love going back there. I'm working with Gabriela Maldonado Montano, who was just about my favorite person to work with. So
yeah, it sounds like it's going to be amazing. So yeah, have a look and see. And I really agree. There's something about being in a group setting with this that really kind of, it just takes things to a different level, I think, sometimes. Yeah, and Jack, hopefully Jack's new soon to be published book will also be part of the life-changing book club in the coming months.
Well, if I don't get it off to my publisher in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to create all kinds of thoughts about myself that are not going to be helpful.
So it sounds like it's pretty close.
Getting there, yes.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks again. Just had some nice comments from Sherry saying thank you so much to everybody who showed up. An amazing experience. Thanks to each of you for sharing. It has been really lovely. So thank you, all of you. And looking forward to some more of the same in the coming months.
Thank you all. I'm glad my voice made it, sort of.
Well, thank you so much, Jack. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.